Painkiller Ghosts, Chapter 17, Tennis Balls and Sushi. Now it's now, and this is how it is. Time's outside with this bandaged left hand and the right hand that a few days ago had put a rolling pin into the man's nose. He has a red baseball hat on. He's got a backpack full of tennis balls. Since he's been shot, he hasn't spent too much time thinking about why he was shot, or who shot him, or if he was a target, or if it was just a misfire. What's done is done, he says. But he's still upset about the disappearance of his old camera. It's bad enough that it had been broken. He could at least have kept it in Mama's attic for the memories. He walks on bare feet to the park. He removes a piece of sidewalk chalk from his backpack and makes an X on a tree. My middle name marks the spot. It's the same tree that Chastity was sitting in front of when she shot Time. Time's never really played baseball, not since middle school or so. In high school, he got interested in photography and film, and after high school, he spent his time with Maria and drugs. This morning, in between chapters she was working on for her latest novel, Mama Exler opened her closet and showed Time a box full of brand new tennis balls. I had always thought some of your dresses smelled like tennis balls, he said, as she smiled. Well, you should always have some fresh tennis balls. But Mama, you don't play tennis. You never know when you could use some new tennis balls. I figured they could be therapy for your hand. Squeeze them, juggle them, I don't know. I'm not a doctor. And she went off to make a cup of tea and go back to her computer, where she was 17 chapters into her newest book. Now it's now, and this is how it is. Time aims the balls at the X he made on the tree, at his middle name, and after he's done throwing them, he picks them up. In his left hand, his tender hand, he squeezes one ball at a time, as much as he can, but not enough to cause too much pain. Then with his right hand, he does the same, even though the right hand is not hurt, and then he switches back to the left hand. He finishes up his exercises for the day, and he walks back home, back to where Suzanne, who's back to being a freelance writer, is at home. She's run out in the car and brought home some sushi. I figured you could just eat this one hand, son. Yeah, but it's hard to get the wasabi on one-handed, Mama. With a tennis ball in hand, he remembers how it felt as he swung the rolling pin, the same one that had been in the kitchen since he was a child. He remembers how it felt as it crashed into Stan's nose. Time remembers how, at the time, when he was swinging the rolling pin into Stan's then unbroken nose, Time imagined he had a baseball bat in his hand and that Stan's nose was a tennis ball. That was always how he and the neighborhood kids played backyard tennis in Suzanne's backyard, with a tennis ball so it wouldn't break her windows. Time remembers having a pleasant, warm feeling as he was breaking Stan's nose, but that might have just been the painkillers. Tonight, after dinner, Suzanne brews a cup of tea and sits at the kitchen table with her laptop and starts to type. She'll be sitting there a couple hours, a few even. Time goes out back. The sun is setting but is not down, so the sky is the color of a pumpkin. Near the 3 lines on the house, the exterior floodlights are also on, giving the lawn an artificial yellow hue. He walks to the middle of the yard and sits on the picnic table that's rotting. It must have been at least 20 years old. He drops a bag of tennis balls at his feet. He's stuffed. He sits with his back to the house and watches the sun set, dipping towards the trees. He's sucking on an after-dinner pill. He crushed it with his teeth, and the bitter parts get stuck in his molars. His tongue is sour and feels dry. He looks to see if he brought a bottle of water with him. He hasn't. He has a joint behind his ear again, and he lights it and smokes it and coughs for a second, and the sweet smoke makes the pill taste in his mouth better, and the setting sun appears to be setting more slowly, although Time knows that it isn't. He doesn't smoke the whole thing before he starts to cough too much, and decides to put the joint down the edge of the picnic table, and then throw some tennis balls. He's been throwing balls at trees every day now for a week. He uses his left arm a little, but enough to exercise it some. His aim is good. It's really improved a lot over the past week. He hits almost every tree he aims at, often in the center. Time throws most of them towards the side yard, and then he gets past the side of the house. He looks over towards the street and sees a car on the road stop directly in front of his house. and as soon as the driver sees Time, the car pulls off. Time watches the car drive off, and then collects the tennis balls. He reaches into his right pocket and pulls out another pill and puts it into his mouth. Then, to help with the bitter taste, he relights the joint, which has gone out, and he smokes the last of it, slowly burning his fingers, sucking on the pill, and savoring the sweet, sweet smoke. While he smokes, he starts to throw the tennis balls out into the dark parts of the yard where the floodlights do not light up. The sun is almost down now, and the edges of the yard near the trees is dark. His stomach feels warm, and he gets the butterfly feeling again. His left leg feels it next. He throws another tennis ball with his right hand, which is feeling heavier, and he's holding the joint in his weak left hand, which is feeling lighter. On the third throw, he hears that jingle again. It comes from behind him, and it bashes past him and darts out into the darkness of the backyard towards where Time threw the ball. A moment later, Time hears a faint panting sound in front of him. He bends down and picks up another ball from the ground, smelling fur. He throws another tennis ball and hears the jingle of the collar getting farther away from him, following the ball into the darkness. When he gets back inside, stoned, Suzanne is still at the table, drinking yet another cup of tea, and she looks up at him with his distant stare and says, "You look like you've seen a ghost." But he blinks his eyes to get his head back into the moment. Then he looks at his mother and says, No, don't worry about it." And he sits on the sofa and turns on the television and is watching the news, and he finds himself falling asleep mid-news story and waking back up again at the start of a commercial and slipping back into sleep again by the end of the commercial break. He wakes his eyes at the sound of a distant bark outside, but can't decide if he really heard a bark or not, and then he decides to drift out again. As he sleeps on the sofa, he dreams of the conversation he had with Mama not too long ago. Do you know what I call things like that? No. What? Painkiller ghosts.